Can you imagine planning your dream wedding, picking out the perfect dress and sending out invitations only to discover a secret so big it makes you call the whole thing off? That's exactly what happened to one bride, and the story is absolutely mind-blowing. This wasn't about a wandering eye or a secret past. This was about something much more calculated, property and deception. Our bride, let's call her Imani, was head over heels for her fiancé. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect partner to build a future with. They had even started looking at homes, planning to buy their first property together as a married couple. It was supposed to be the beginning of their shared legacy. Imani stood in front of the mirror, her white gown glowing under the soft hotel lights. In just an hour, she was supposed to marry the man she thought she knew, the man who promised her forever. But a single phone call changed everything. Her fiancé wasn't just hiding another woman. He was hiding something much bigger, something about the very house they were supposed to build their future in. As tears mixed with her lipstick, Imani realized this wasn't a wedding day anymore. It was the day she'd expose the truth and make everyone who lied to her regret ever crossing her. The soft hum of a string quartet drifted through the hotel corridor, weaving its way toward the bridal suite where Imani sat in front of a mirror she barely recognized herself in. The makeup artist had finished her work hours ago, but Imani's reflection now looked distant, hollow, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold. The white gown shimmered under the golden lights, its satin folds whispering the promises of forever, but Imani's heart, it wasn't whispering anything. It was silent, uneasy, waiting for something she couldn't yet name. Outside the room, laughter echoed. Bridesmaids chatting, cameras flashing, guests arriving. Everyone was excited. Everyone except her. Ethan, her fiancé, was downstairs greeting people. His voice had filled the hotel lobby all morning, smooth, confident, charming. The same voice that once made Imani believe she could trust him with everything. Her love, her time, her savings, her dreams. He was her anchor when life got too heavy, or at least that's what she'd told herself, until now. A faint knock broke through the quiet. It was Tasha, her cousin and maid of honor, holding Imani's phone. "Hey girl, this just came for you. Some delivery guy said it was urgent. Looked official." Imani frowned. "Official? On my wedding day?" Tasha nodded. "Yeah, said it couldn't wait." Imani took the small envelope sealed neatly in beige paper. There was no return address and just her name written in clean black ink. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tore it open. Inside was a folded document heavy and cold against her skin. Property deed, 1074 Peachtree Avenue, Atlanta. Her eyes skimmed the text and the words hit her like thunder. Owner, Ethan Miller. Co-owner, Danielle Roberts. Not Imani Brooks. Not her. For a moment, the entire room faded. The laughter outside dulled to a distant hum. Imani felt the weight of her chest tighten, the edges of her vision blur. Her name wasn't there, not on the property they'd bought together, not on the home Ethan had said was the beginning of their life. Tasha's voice was faint. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Imani's throat was dry. She read the names again. Ethan Miller. Danielle Roberts. That was the house. The same one she'd helped pick out, the one she'd put her savings into. He'd told her he needed her to wire the money quickly because the market was hot. She hadn't questioned it. She'd trusted him. That trust now sat on her lap, torn open, staring back in black and white proof of betrayal. Tasha moved closer. "Girl, who is Danielle?" Imani whispered. "I don't know, but I'm about to find out." She grabbed her phone and opened Ethan's messages. Her fingers scrolled through hundreds of texts, sweet, charming, full of affection. But then, hidden deep between work threads, there it was, Danielle. Her name, her messages, her voice notes, and one message that shattered whatever was left of Imani's calm. "Can't wait to finally move into our place after the wedding rush. Love you, Ethan." The phone slipped from her hand. It hit the carpet with a soft thud, but to Imani it sounded like the end of something sacred. Tasha knelt beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're not telling me," Imani cut her off. "I'm not marrying him." Her voice didn't tremble. It was quiet, but firm. The kind of tone that comes not from panic but from realization. The air around her seemed to still, like even the world had stopped to listen. She stood up slowly, her gown brushing against the floor, heavy now, not with beauty, but with the weight of deceit. Imani walked toward the window, pulling aside the curtain. Below, guests were beginning to gather. White flowers, smiling faces, a photographer shouting for people to pose, all of them waiting for a love story that no longer existed. Tasha whispered, "Imani, you can't just walk out like this." "Think." "I am thinking," Imani said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking for years, Tasha. About him, about us, about how everything always seemed a little too perfect. Now I know why." Tasha swallowed hard. "You want me to call the planner?" Imani turned around, her eyes suddenly sharp, cold. "No, let him find out the way I did. Let him stand there, waiting for me, wondering what went wrong." For the first time that morning, Imani smiled. Not the soft, dreamy smile of a bride, but the quiet, dangerous smile of a woman who'd finally woken up. She walked over to the vanity and picked up her engagement ring. It caught the light, glimmering beautifully. A perfect illusion. Just like Ethan. She placed it on the table beside the open deed and whispered, "You can keep your house, Ethan, but you'll never own me." Downstairs, the wedding music began to play. The guests stood expecting her grand entrance. But upstairs, Imani was slipping off her heels, grabbing her small purse and walking out the back door of the hotel. Outside, the sky was gray, soft rain threatening to fall. She walked without looking back, her gown dragging slightly on the concrete, streaking white with dust. She didn't know where she was going yet. Maybe nowhere, maybe everywhere. But one thing was certain, Imani wasn't running away. She was walking toward something else entirely. As she disappeared down Peachtree Street, her phone buzzed. "Ethan, where are you?" "Everyone's waiting." Then another. "Imani, this isn't funny. Where the hell are you?" She stopped walking, staring at the screen, rain starting to fall harder now. She typed slowly, deliberately, and hit send. "Check the envelope on my chair. You'll find everything you need to know." And with that, she slipped the phone into her purse, lifted her head to the sky and walked forward. Into the storm, into her truth, into the beginning of her revenge. The ballroom was glowing under chandeliers, soft jazz playing as guests murmured about delays. Ethan adjusted his tie for the third time, pacing near the altar. The officiant smiled nervously, trying to hide the tension in the room. The best man whispered something to him, but Ethan brushed it off. "She'll be here," he muttered, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, drumming against the Grand Hotel windows. Every drop seemed to echo the growing unease inside him. Imani was never late, not for meetings, not for dinner, not for life. Then came the moment that shattered his composure. Tasha walked down the aisle, not in her bridesmaid's dress, but in her everyday clothes, face pale and expression unreadable. She walked straight up to Ethan, holding the small beige envelope in her hand. "You might want to read this," she said, her voice low but steady. Ethan frowned, his confusion twisting into irritation. What is this supposed to be? "Where's Imani?" Tasha didn't answer. She turned and walked out as quickly as she'd come, leaving whispers swirling in her wake. Ethan tore open the envelope, scanning the paper inside. It took him less than 10 seconds to understand everything. The deed. The signature. The name Danielle Roberts. His fingers clenched around the paper, crumpling it. His chest tightened with panic. He turned to his best man, voice trembling between anger and fear. "Who sent this? How did she even—" "Ethan," the man whispered, glancing nervously at the watching crowd. "People are staring." Ethan looked up to see a sea of confused faces, guests whispering, phones raised, the beginnings of scandal filling the air like smoke. The officiant cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Miller, is everything all right?" Ethan didn't answer. He stormed off the stage, through the side door, his polished shoes echoing down the hallway. His phone buzzed, and there it was, Imani's final message. "Check the envelope on my chair. You'll find everything you need to know." He stood there, frozen, the sound of rain and chatter melting into a dull roar in his ears. For the first time, Ethan Miller, confident, composed, untouchable Ethan, felt real fear. Across town, Imani sat quietly in a small cafe, her gown replaced with jeans and a long gray coat. Her hair was still styled for the ceremony, a surreal reminder of the morning that had changed everything. The barista glanced at her curiously. There was something strange about seeing a woman with wedding makeup sipping coffee alone in the corner. her bouquet lying wilted beside her. She didn't care. Imani had spent years building her career, saving every dollar, investing carefully. When she met Ethan, he'd seemed different. Grounded, patient, the kind of man who didn't flinch at her ambition. They'd met at a property auction, both bidding for the same lot. He'd won, but he'd offered to partner with her afterward. That partnership turned into friendship, then love, or what she thought was love. Now sitting in that cafe, she began to replay everything in her head. The late-night calls he'd take in another room, the way he'd insist on handling paperwork, for efficiency, the charming smiles that always came when she asked questions about money. It was all a carefully built illusion. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was a number she didn't recognize. A woman's voice came through the line, smooth and slightly trembling. "Hi, is this Imani Brooks?" "Yes, who's this?" "This is Danielle Roberts." "I think we need to talk. It's about Ethan." Imani's breath caught. "How did you get my number?" "Doesn't matter right now. I didn't know about you until recently. He said you were his business partner. But after what happened today, hearing about a wedding, I knew something wasn't right." Imani's jaw tightened. "So you're the one on the deed." There was a long pause. "He said it was a tax thing, that he couldn't put the house under his name while he was handling another deal. I didn't know he was engaged." I swear Imani closed her eyes. It didn't matter whether Danielle was telling the truth or not. The damage was done. Ethan had played both of them, using one woman's trust and another's name to cover his lies. "Where are you?" Imani asked finally. "Buckhead. I can meet you tonight." "Please, I just want to make things right." Imani hesitated, her instincts warning her, but she needed the truth. All of it. That night, as the rain eased into a cold mist, Imani arrived at a quiet rooftop bar in Buckhead. The city lights flickered below, painting reflections across the glass. Danielle was already there, tall, elegant, blonde hair tucked under a scarf. She looked nervous, clutching a small folder in her hand. "Imani?" she asked softly. Imani nodded. They sat across from each other, two strangers bound by the same lie. Danielle slid the folder across the table. "You should see this. Bank transfers, property agreements, emails. He used both of us to fund his deals. He's been moving money between accounts under different names." Imani opened the folder. Each page confirmed what she feared. The house was just one piece of something larger. Ethan wasn't just a liar. He was a manipulator. A thief hiding behind charm and luxury. Danielle's voice broke slightly. "He told me he loved me too, you know. Said he was ending things with you because you weren't ready for commitment. I guess that was the same day he proposed." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't hatred. It was clarity. Imani closed the folder and met Danielle's eyes. "You and I have nothing to fight over. He built his kingdom on our backs, and now—" Her voice hardened. "Now I'm going to tear it down." Danielle swallowed. "What are you planning to do?" Imani leaned back, her face calm but her eyes burning with quiet determination. "I'm going to make sure Ethan loses everything he ever tried to take from me. His business, his money, his name, everything." She stood up, the rain-damp air brushing against her skin. "You said he moves money through multiple accounts?" Danielle nodded. "Yes, I've seen the transfers." Imani smiled faintly. "Then I know exactly where to start." As she walked away into the Atlanta night, her reflection flickered in the glass. No longer a bride, no longer a victim, but a woman reborn from betrayal. The wedding was over. The real story had just begun. Atlanta's skyline glittered in the distance, but to Imani it looked different now. Colder, sharper, as if every light in the city hid another secret. The air carried the smell of rain and asphalt, the kind that lingers after a storm, the kind that makes memories cling. She walked with purpose down Peachtree Street, her heels clicking against the pavement, her mind running faster than her feet. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that hotel suite hours earlier, bright-eyed, trusting, dreaming of vows and forever. That Imani had been buried under the weight of betrayal. What walked now was someone new, someone who understood that love without honesty was nothing but an illusion, and that illusions could be shattered. When she reached her apartment, she didn't cry. Not anymore. She poured herself a glass of water, sat at her desk, and opened her laptop. Her reflection in the black screen looked determined. She whispered softly to herself, You built your world on my trust. Ethan, now I'm going to burn it down, piece by piece. The first thing she did was open the shared folder where she and Ethan had kept their investment files and the one they used for transparency. But when she tried to log in, it was gone. Access denied. Her account had been removed. He'd covered his tracks, or at least he thought he had. Imani leaned back, took a deep breath, and began tracing everything from memory. Property addresses, purchase dates, payment transfers. Ethan had always bragged about being organized. He didn't realize that she'd learned his habits, his patterns, his methods. Every lie leaves a trail. Every thief leaves fingerprints. She opened her bank app and scrolled through old transactions. That's when she saw it. A $50,000 transfer made to Miller Realty Holdings, LLC. She had assumed it was their company's new joint venture. But when she cross-checked it online, the LLC wasn't listed under both their names. Just Ethan's. He had used her money to buy into his empire and locked her out completely. Imani exhaled slowly, her jaw tightening. You wanted to play dirty, she whispered. Let's see how well you handle it when someone plays smarter. Across town, Ethan sat in his condo, phone buzzing nonstop, journalists, clients, and a dozen wedding guests, trying to understand what had happened. He ignored them all. The PR damage was spreading faster than he expected. One wrong rumor and years of his self-made man reputation could crumble. Danielle hadn't answered any of his calls either. That alone made him nervous. He poured himself a drink, pacing the floor, trying to piece together what Imani might know. How much she'd seen, how much she'd guessed. Then his phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. He opened it. Hope you liked my wedding gift. That was just the beginning. No name. No signature. Just those words. His stomach twisted. Ethan slammed the glass on the counter, the sound echoing in the empty room. He knew it was her, Imani. And if she was angry enough to cancel a wedding, she was angry enough to destroy him. He'd underestimated her before. That was his first mistake. Now it might be his last. Over the next few days, Imani moved quietly, deliberately. She reached out to old contacts in real estate, people she'd met before Ethan entered her life, people he didn't know existed. They respected her for her professionalism, her sharp eye for deals. When she mentioned Ethan Miller's name, the tone in their voices shifted. Oh, him? One agent said. Yeah, he's been throwing money around like confetti. Some of those properties don't even make sense. Overpriced, poor locations, almost like he's laundering money through them. Another added, you didn't hear it from me, but I've seen deals under fake shell names, all tied to his office. That was all she needed. She began collecting documents, recording calls, taking screenshots, and building a quiet case. But revenge wasn't just about exposure. It was about balance. And she wanted him to feel what she had felt. The slow unraveling of everything he thought he controlled. A week later, Imani arranged a meeting with a local journalist named Jordan Lee, an African-American reporter known for exposing corporate fraud. They met in a quiet cafe near Midtown. Jordan, sharp-eyed and composed, listened as Imani laid everything out. The property deeds, the shell accounts, the fake partnerships, the deception. When she finished, Jordan leaned back, whistling low. You've got enough here to start a firestorm, he said. But are you sure you want this to go public? Once it does, there's no going back. Imani looked him straight in the eye. He built his business by using women's trust, mine and others. I want people to see the truth. Every dirty detail, Jordan nodded slowly. Then we do this right. We'll verify everything, quietly. When it breaks, it'll be everywhere. She smiled faintly. That's all I need. While the investigation began, Imani worked her own side of the war, the emotional one. Ethan's friends started calling her, pretending to check in. She could hear the curiosity in their voices, the gossip bubbling behind their concern. We're so sorry about what happened, Imani, one woman said sweetly. Ethan's been a mess. He didn't mean to hurt you. Imani smiled through the phone, her tone smooth and unbothered. I'm sure he didn't, she said calmly. But he's about to learn that some mistakes don't stay buried. The moment she hung up, she opened her laptop and sent Jordan one final file, the one Danielle had given her, containing bank transfers between Ethan's company and a private account under her name. Ethan had forged her signature, used her name as a shield for his own crimes. Imani's voice trembled as she said it out loud, almost like a vow. You took my love and my trust. Now I'm taking your empire. Late that night, Ethan got another message. This time it wasn't a text, it was a link. He clicked it. A news article flashed across the screen. Atlanta real estate star Ethan Miller under investigation for property fraud. His face went pale. Beneath the headline was a photo of him at a gala, smiling, and next to it a photo of Imani looking fierce, confident, standing outside the courthouse steps. The caption read, "Former fiancé exposes alleged real estate scam involving multiple shell companies and fake property ownership." His drink slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Told you the wedding was just the beginning." Imani sat in her apartment, watching the news report roll across her TV. Her reflection stared back from the screen, steady, unflinching. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about showing every woman who'd ever been betrayed that silence was never strength. Her phone vibrated once more. A message from an unknown sender. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Imani's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered. "You still think you're in control." She turned off the TV, the city lights flickering outside her window. The storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The next morning, Atlanta buzzed with whispers. Ethan Miller, the man who once graced magazine covers as a self-made real estate genius, was now the centerpiece of a scandal that spread faster than wildfire. The internet was ruthless. Hashtags like Ethan Exposed and Bride That Fought Back trended across social media. Every news channel carried his face. The charming smile now twisted into a symbol of deceit. Some defended him, calling it a misunderstanding, but most didn't, because the truth had weight, and this truth was heavy. Imani watched from her apartment, sipping her coffee calmly as her phone lit up with notifications. Journalists wanted interviews, influencers wanted statements, even former clients of Ethan reached out, eager to share their stories. But she stayed silent. For now. The power of silence, she knew, was louder than any denial. Down in Buckhead, Ethan wasn't calm. He sat in his office surrounded by lawyers, pacing the room with a clenched jaw. His crisp white shirt was wrinkled, his tie gone, his hair unkempt, a rare sight for a man who once looked as polished as his marble floors. "This is insane," he snapped, slamming a hand on the desk. "They're painting me like some criminal. You're my lawyer, do something." One of the attorneys, a tall man with tired eyes, sighed. "Ethan, the evidence looks bad. Multiple accounts, forged signatures, fake property deeds. They're all business tactics," Ethan interrupted sharply. "Legal gray areas. Everyone does it." The lawyer exchanged glances with his team. "Maybe, but not everyone gets caught by a woman who documented everything. You underestimated her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't talk to me about her." He turned toward the window, looking down at the city he used to own. "I built this life from nothing. I made her. Without me, she'd still be." He stopped himself. The room was silent. Even he knew that wasn't true, because deep down Ethan remembered the truth. It was Imani's vision, her ideas, her savings that had built his first property. Her trust had been the foundation of his empire. He'd used her brilliance to get where he was. Now that foundation was cracking, and everything was falling with it. That afternoon, Ethan held a press conference at one of his downtown properties, cameras flashing, microphones lined up, the city watching. He straightened his posture, slipped on his rehearsed smile, and began. "I want to make something clear," he said, his voice measured calm. "The rumors spreading online are completely false. I have always operated within the law. The woman behind these accusations, my former fiancé, is heartbroken and understandably emotional. But this," he gestured toward the cameras, "this is nothing more than a smear campaign." He paused, lowering his tone. "I love Imani, I always will. But sometimes love and business don't mix," the crowd murmured. The words sounded sympathetic and almost believable. But not to everyone. Because watching from home, Imani leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. There it was. The manipulation. The carefully crafted narrative. Ethan had flipped the script, turning himself into the victim, and her into the angry ex. She smiled coldly. "You want to play public?" she whispered. "Then let's play public. 2 hours later, the press conference clip had gone viral, and so had a new post from Imani's verified account. Imani Brooks, if it's just heartbreak, then why did the FBI seize your hard drives this morning? Receipt season. You're the wedding that never happened. The internet exploded. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Oh, she's not playing. This queen turned pain into power. Ethan better hide. Ethan's PR team scrambled, but it was too late. The image of him smiling beside federal agents carrying boxes out of his office was already circulating online. Later that evening, Imani received a call from Jordan Lee, the journalist. It's confirmed, he said. Federal agents raided his office this morning. They found evidence of fraudulent property transfers and unreported income, but there's more. Imani straightened in her chair. More, Jordan hesitated. One of his partners is under investigation, too. Someone with deep pockets, older investors with government contracts. You've touched something big, Imani. For a moment, the weight of it all settled on her. She'd wanted revenge, yes, but this was growing into something larger. Something that reached beyond Ethan. She took a deep breath. Then we don't stop now, Jordan chuckled. You're fearless, Imani smiled faintly. No, Jordan. I'm finally free. While the media frenzy unfolded, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights flickering like fading hope. The world he'd built was crumbling faster than he could rebuild it. Business partners were cutting ties. His accounts were being frozen. And every time he turned on the TV, her name, Imani Brooks, was there. Her face on the screen. Her strength in her words. Her silence cutting deeper than his anger ever could. He poured another drink, but his hand shook as he lifted it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard her voice. Calm, sure. The night she'd walked away. You can keep your house, Ethan, but you'll never own me. The glass shattered against the floor, spilling dark liquid across the marble. Ethan stared at it for a long time, his reflection warped in the spill. For the first time, he realized that maybe he hadn't just lost a fiancé. He'd lost the one person who made him human. But remorse wasn't in his nature. Power was, and he wasn't done fighting. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A low, gravelly voice answered. Didn't think I'd hear from you again, Miller, the man said. I need a favor, Ethan said quietly. And I'll pay whatever it takes. There was a pause. Then what's the job? Ethan's voice dropped cold. I need everything on Imani Brooks and where she lives, who she talks to, everything. She wants war? I'll give her one. Meanwhile, Imani sat by her window, unaware of the shadow now moving against her. Her city, once filled with memories of him, now looked like a battlefield. But she wasn't afraid. She was focused. She'd exposed the liar. She'd shaken his empire. But the deeper she went, the more she realized. Ethan wasn't just a fraud. He was a man protected by powerful people who couldn't afford for his secrets to leak. And in her pursuit of truth, she had just walked into a world far darker than love gone wrong. A world where money, lies and silence were currency. Imani exhaled softly, her reflection steady against the glass. He thought she'd stop once he fell. But she wasn't done. Not yet, because this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was war. The next few days painted a strange picture across Atlanta. The city's skyline was bright, but its conversations were darker. Whispers of corruption, betrayal, and a fallen star named Ethan Miller. Every morning headline carried his name, every talk show dissected his downfall, and every woman who'd been burned by a charming man found quiet satisfaction in watching him crumble. But beneath all the noise, something more dangerous was stirring. Imani woke up before dawn, the glow of her phone lighting her face. Jordan had texted overnight. Jordan, we've traced Ethan's shell companies. There's a bigger player behind him. Meet me at the office ASAP. Her stomach tightened. Bigger player. The words felt heavy. She pulled on her black coat, tied her curls into a bun, and stepped out into the gray morning. By the time she reached Jordan's small downtown office, the journalist was already buried in files and news clippings. Coffee cups cluttered the table, half empty and forgotten. He looked up as she entered. You're not going to believe this, he said. Imani crossed her arms. Try me. Jordan turned the laptop around. On the screen was a corporate chart. Dozens of company names branching out from one central logo. Barton Development Group. Barton, Imani murmured. As in Thomas Barton? Jordan nodded grimly. The same. Multi-millionaire government contracts, owns half of Midtown's luxury towers. Ethan's companies funnel money into Barton's network. It's all layered to hide ownership, but the trail leads straight to him. Imani frowned. So Ethan's just a pawn? More like a middleman, Jordan said. He built a fake empire on Barton's real money. Barton funds his projects. Ethan flips the properties under false names to launder it back. It's a loop, and your money, Imani, was part of that loop. Imani's hands tightened into fists. So Barton's been using me too. Jordan hesitated. Indirectly, yes. But Barton's the kind of man who doesn't like his name in headlines. If you push this story further, you're not just exposing Ethan. You're poking a bear that's been untouchable for 20 years. Imani leaned forward, eyes sharp. Then it's time someone made him feel what it's like to bleed. Across the city, Ethan stood in the lavish living room of a penthouse that wasn't his, Barton's. The man himself sat behind a mahogany desk, calm and composed, his gray suit immaculate, his presence commanding. His voice carried the weight of old money and buried sins. "You've caused me a problem, Ethan," Barton said, lighting a cigar. "The kind of problem I don't pay people to create." Ethan swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm handling it. I just need time. The media will die down. I can fix—" Barton's voice cut through the air like a knife. "You can't fix stupidity." He leaned forward, smoke curling around his face. "You let your emotions get in the way. You were supposed to keep her quiet. Instead, she's on national television turning your name into poison." Ethan's jaw tensed. "She blindsided me." "I didn't think—" "That's right," Barton interrupted. "You didn't think." He tapped ash into the tray. "You don't humiliate a woman like that and expect her to disappear quietly. You made her dangerous. And now her anger is costing me millions." Ethan stepped forward, desperate. "Just tell me what you want me to do." Barton smirked. "I want her silenced. But not publicly. You make her stop digging. You make her afraid to keep going. Do that and maybe, I'll save what's left of your reputation." Ethan nodded slowly, a flicker of fear behind his eyes. "I can handle her." Barton leaned back, smiling faintly. "You already tried handling her once, didn't you? Look where that got you." The room fell silent. Ethan clenched his fists. "This time will be different." That evening, Imani returned home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. She froze. The light inside flickered. A chill ran down her spine. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The living room was quiet, too quiet. Everything looked untouched except for one thing. Her wedding dress. The one she'd left at the hotel. It was hanging from her ceiling fan, swaying gently, the hem soaked in red paint. On the coffee table sat a small note in Ethan's handwriting. "You should have stayed silent." Imani's breath caught. She backed away, heart pounding. Someone had been inside her home. Maybe still was. Her phone trembled in her hand as she called Jordan. "Someone broke in," she said, her voice low. "They left a message." Jordan cursed under his breath. "Get out of there, now, I'll send someone." Imani didn't wait. She grabbed her bag and ran. Her steps echoed down the stairwell as she pushed through the building's side door and into the rain-soaked night. For the first time since the wedding, she felt fear. Real, physical fear. But beneath it, something stronger flickered. Not panic, rage. She looked up at the storm clouds, breathing heavily. "You think you can scare me?" she whispered. "You're wrong. You just showed me how scared you are." Hours later, Imani sat in Jordan's office, drenched but calm. She stared at the photo of Barton on the screen. Silver hair, sharp smile, the look of a man who thought he was untouchable. "Ethan's trying to intimidate me," she said quietly. "But he's just doing Barton's dirty work." Jordan nodded. "I've got contacts in D.C. Barton's got politicians on his payroll. If you go after him, you'll need proof so strong it can't be buried." Imani exhaled. "Then that's what I'll get." Jordan hesitated. "And Ethan?" She looked out the window, rain streaking the glass. "He's not my problem anymore. He's Barton's pawn. But if he comes for me again, I'll remind him why he should have stayed afraid." Meanwhile, Barton's phone buzzed as he left his office. A single text appeared on the screen, from Ethan. "She's not backing down." Barton's reply came seconds later. "Then neither do we." That night, as thunder rolled over Atlanta, Imani couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the image of the red-stained dress. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. He wanted her to feel small, violated, powerless. But it had the opposite effect. She opened her laptop. her reflection fierce in the glow of the screen. She began pulling financial records, cross-referencing Barton's projects, tracing offshore accounts, company subsidiaries. Every lie buried in spreadsheets and shell firms. Somewhere between rage and focus, she realized something chilling. Barton had projects under federal housing grants. If she could prove he'd used government funds for fake properties, it wouldn't just destroy him. It would bring down everyone tied to him, politicians, banks, and investors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, searching, connecting, piecing together a puzzle of corruption decades deep. When the first document matched, a government grant tied to a non-existent property, she smiled. "Got you," she whispered. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky. The next morning, a car pulled up outside her apartment. A man in a suit stepped out, sunglasses on despite the clouds. He looked up at her window, then spoke softly into his earpiece. "Target located," he said. "Proceeding as planned." Morning light broke softly over Atlanta, but for Imani, peace had long since vanished. She stood by her window, clutching a mug of coffee gone cold, watching a black sedan parked across the street. It had been there since before dawn. No plates, tinted windows, motionless. Every instinct told her she was being watched. She turned away, trying to steady her breathing. The wedding betrayal had hurt her heart, but this was different. This was survival. Someone wanted her quiet, and she could feel the pressure closing in. Still, she wasn't the type to break. If anything, danger sharpened her resolve. She opened her laptop, the blue glow reflecting in her tired eyes. The spreadsheet she'd worked on all night was still open, columns of numbers, property names, and coded transactions. But one document had caught her attention before she'd fallen asleep. A land purchase record from 15 years ago. The name on the file stopped her cold. Brooks Construction LLC, her last name. Her father's old company. Imani stared at it, disbelief sinking in. Her father, Samuel Brooks, had run a small construction business before he died in a mysterious car accident when she was 16. The official story was that it was just an accident. Late night, rainy road, brake failure. But her mother had never believed it. Now, seeing his company's name inside Barton's old development archives, she felt her pulse quicken. "What were you doing in his files, Daddy?" She clicked deeper, tracing the project name. Brookview Estates, 2009. The listed developer, Barton Development Group, and the co-signer on the final payment transfer, Thomas Barton and Samuel Brooks. Imani's breath caught. Her father had worked with Barton, and somehow no one had ever told her. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan's world was unraveling faster than he could lie. He sat in his penthouse, the once pristine space now scattered with documents and empty glasses. His phone buzzed, Barton's name flashing across the screen. He hesitated, knowing this call wouldn't be pleasant. He answered anyway. "Sir, Save it," Barton interrupted. His tone was ice. "The girl is still digging. You told me you could handle it." "I'm trying," Ethan snapped. "But she's not just angry, she's smart. She's got that journalist working with her, and she's found connections, deep ones." There was silence on the other end. Then Barton said calmly, "You do realize that if she exposes me, she exposes you too. And if I fall, Ethan, you won't live to see what happens next." Ethan's throat went dry. "What do you want me to do?" "End it," Barton said. "Now. Before she finds something she can't unsee." The line went dead. Ethan sank back in his chair, panic creeping into his chest. Barton was losing patience, and when powerful men got desperate, people disappeared. He rubbed his face, whispering, "What did you get yourself into, Imani?" At that same moment, Imani met Jordan in a quiet diner just off Edgewood Avenue. The city buzzed outside, horns, chatter, life. But inside, tension hung heavy. Jordan slid a folder across the table. "I ran that name you found, Brooks Construction. Your father's company." Imani's eyes darted to his face. And Jordan sighed. He wasn't just a subcontractor for Barton. He was the primary contractor for a project that never got built. Brookview Estates, and the same one in your spreadsheet. She frowned. Never built? What happened to the money? "That's the thing," Jordan said quietly. "It vanished. Millions in government housing funds. 2 months later, your father's car crashed." The words hit her like a wave. Her stomach dropped. She felt the air leave her lungs. "No," she whispered. You're saying Barton? Jordan nodded slowly. It's possible. If he was skimming federal funds back then, your father might have found out. And that accident. He trailed off, his expression grim. Maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Imani's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. Her jaw tightened. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory, the sound of him humming while fixing old blueprints at the kitchen table. She remembered the night before the crash. How distracted he'd been. How he'd said, "Sometimes telling the truth costs more than people think." Now she finally understood what he meant. Her voice was low, steady. "He killed my father." Jordan reached across the table. "Imani, we need to be careful. If Barton's people are watching you, they'll do anything to stop this from coming out." She nodded slowly. "Let them watch. I've got nothing left to lose." That night, Imani returned to her apartment, her mind spinning. She locked the door behind her and sat in the dark, staring at her father's old photo, him in his work boots smiling, holding her when she was little. "Daddy," she whispered, "I'll finish what they started. I'll make them remember your name." As she spoke, headlights flashed outside. The same black sedan from that morning was still there, engine idling now. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You're digging into the wrong graves, Imani." She deleted it without flinching, her heart pounding. But then came another. "Your father did the same thing. Look where it got him." The phone slipped slightly in her hand. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to stay calm. Fear was what they wanted. Fear was what fed men like Barton. Instead, she typed back, "Then I guess I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." 2 hours later, a shadow stood outside her building. The man in the black suit lifted his phone to his ear. "She's not backing off," he said quietly. "Do we proceed?" On the other end, Barton's cold voice replied, "Not yet. Let her dig. The deeper she goes, the easier it'll be to bury her." The line went dead. Meanwhile, inside, Imani had fallen asleep at her desk, the glow of her laptop still on. A new file had finished downloading, one she hadn't seen yet. It was from an anonymous source. The subject line read, "He didn't die in an accident." She blinked awake, opening the file. Inside was a police report, a witness statement, a photograph of Barton's car near the crash site, time-stamped the same night her father died. Her hand shook as she scrolled to the final line of the report. "Unidentified man seen leaving the scene in a black Mercedes registered to Thomas Barton." The screen blurred as her tears finally fell. She wasn't just chasing revenge anymore. She was chasing truth, and this time the truth had a name. She wiped her eyes, whispered through clenched teeth, "Thomas Barton, you took my father. You took my peace. Now I'm taking everything you built." Lightning cracked outside, thunder shaking the window pane. In that moment, Imani Brooks stopped being a woman wronged. She became a storm. The following week crawled by under a thick cloud of tension hanging over Atlanta's skyline. The city moved on, traffic, business, noise. But for 3 people, life had become a slow, silent war. Imani, Ethan, Barton. Each one waiting for the other to make the first mistake. Imani sat in a quiet corner of a co-working space downtown, her laptop open, her hood up to hide her face. She had learned to move carefully. No routines, no predictable routes. She'd changed her phone, her locks, even her habits. The black sedan still appeared sometimes, but she'd stopped letting it scare her. She was no longer prey. She was the hunter now. Jordan's contacts in D.C. had started verifying her father's case. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Barton had been skimming from government housing grants for over 2 decades. Dozens of unfinished projects, millions of dollars gone. Her father's company had been one of the few that noticed, and that discovery had likely cost him his life. Imani's new plan was simple: expose Barton from the inside. She couldn't do it alone, though. Barton's company was protected by layers of lawyers, shell firms, and silence. She needed someone on the inside, someone who knew where the real records were. That help came from an unexpected source. Her phone buzzed with a message from a private number. "I work for Barton. I know what he did to your father. Meet me tonight, alone." Imani stared at the message, her heart thudding. It could be a trap, but something about the wording, the mention of her father, was felt personal. Someone knew. She typed back, "Where?" The reply came instantly. The parking deck behind Barton Tower, level 3, midnight. At the same time, Ethan was pacing his penthouse, paranoia creeping into every corner of his mind. The walls felt smaller every day, the shadows longer. Barton had gone silent for 3 days now. No calls, no meetings, nothing. That silence terrified him more than the shouting ever had. He'd been loyal. He'd done what Barton asked. He'd risked everything for that man's approval. And now he was disposable. A knock echoed at the door. Ethan froze. "Who is it?" He called, a pause. Then a low voice replied, "Delivery." He opened the door slightly, just enough to see a single white envelope on the floor. No one was there. The hallway was empty. He picked it up cautiously, his hands trembling. Inside was a single photograph. It was of him, standing outside Imani's apartment 2 nights ago, scrawled across the bottom in red ink. "You're being watched, too." Ethan's knees went weak. He sat down hard, staring at the photo. Barton wasn't protecting him anymore. Barton was tracking him. He whispered almost to himself, "He's going to kill me." For the first time, Ethan understood that he and Imani were no longer enemies. They were both targets of the same man. That night, rain slicked the streets of downtown Atlanta as Imani parked her car 2 blocks from Barton Tower. The massive glass building loomed over the city, reflecting flashes of lightning across its mirrored surface. She pulled her hood up and walked quickly toward the parking deck, the air heavy with danger. Level 3 was dimly lit, half the bulbs flickering, the hum of distant engines echoing through the concrete. She moved cautiously, scanning for movement. "Imani." The voice came from behind her. Low, nervous, she spun around. A woman stepped out from behind a pillar, mid-30s business attire under a raincoat, her eyes darting anxiously. "My name's Vanessa," she said softly. "I work in Barton's accounting department." Imani didn't lower her guard. "You said you knew about my father." Vanessa nodded quickly, glancing over her shoulder. "I found old ledgers last week. They were supposed to be destroyed years ago, but someone filed them wrong. Your father's company, Brooks Construction, was listed as the contractor for Brookview Estates. Barton moved federal funds into fake invoices using your father's signature. When Samuel confronted him, Barton ordered his car tampered with. It wasn't an accident, Imani, it was murder." The word hung heavy in the cold air. Imani's fists clenched. Her heart felt like it might burst out of her chest, but her voice stayed calm. "Do you have proof?" Vanessa nodded again and handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Internal memos, transfer logs, even Barton's email authorization. If this goes public, it'll ruin him. But if he finds out I took this..." Imani met her eyes. "He won't, I promise." Vanessa swallowed hard. "You don't understand, Ms. Brooks. Barton has friends in high places. Judges, politicians, developers. This isn't just about him, it's about an entire network. If you take him down, others will come for you." Imani tucked the flash drive into her coat pocket. "Let them. I'm not my father. I don't run." Before Vanessa could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the ramp above. Heavy, deliberate. Both women froze. "Go," Imani whispered. "Get out of here." Vanessa turned to run, disappearing between parked cars. Imani ducked behind a pillar, peering through the dim light. A man in a suit stepped into view. Tall, built, earpiece in his ear. Barton security. He scanned the level, flashlight cutting across the concrete. Imani held her breath, crouching low. Her heart pounded as the beam passed inches from her face. After a tense minute, he turned and walked away, muttering into his mic. The sound of his footsteps faded. Imani exhaled shakily and stood. The flash drive in her pocket felt like a heartbeat, pulsing with secrets, with danger, with truth. She walked quickly toward her car, pulling out her phone to text Jordan, "I've got proof. Barton killed my father. Meet tomorrow." As she hit send, her headlights caught movement in her rearview mirror. A black car pulled out from the shadows, following her. Across town, Ethan sat alone in the dark, a gun on the table beside him. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "She's going to expose everything, including you." He stared at it for a long time, his thoughts spinning. He should have deleted it, but instead he whispered into the silence, "Maybe it's time someone does." He picked up the phone and began to dial. When the line connected, he said softly, "Imani, it's me. We need to talk, before Barton kills us both." Imani ended the call with trembling hands, staring out her windshield. The rain hit harder now, blurring the city lights. She didn't trust Ethan, not fully. But if Barton wanted them both dead, then maybe, just maybe, they could turn their shared betrayal into a weapon. She gripped the steering wheel, determination solidifying inside her, her father's truth. Ethan's guilt, Barton's empire, all of it was connected, and she was going to make sure every piece of it burned. Atlanta's night air carried a heavy stillness, the kind that hums right before a storm breaks loose. The streets glistened under the glow of streetlights, reflections dancing in puddles like ghosts. Imani sat in her car at a near-empty gas station on the south end of the city, her phone clutched tight in her hand. Ethan had texted her an address. No tricks, no press, just talk. She didn't trust him, but she knew he was desperate. And desperation made people dangerous, but also honest. She checked the gun in her glove compartment one more time, tucked it back, and exhaled. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," she whispered under her breath. "It just means I'm not done with you yet." She started the engine and pulled out into the wet streets, following the faint GPS glow toward the warehouse district, a stretch of old brick buildings that once held the city's bones. Inside one of those warehouses, Ethan paced the floor, hands shaking slightly. His once perfect hair was unkempt, his shirt half untucked, the sharp edge of his confidence dulled by fear. Every sound made him flinch, the wind rattling the metal siding, a distant horn, even the soft buzz of his phone. He was a man cornered by his own lies, and he knew it. When he heard the sound of tires on gravel, his heart jumped. The door creaked open. Imani stepped inside, her hood up, her silhouette sharp against the streetlight behind her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain's rhythm filled the silence between them. Then Imani broke it. "You picked the perfect place for liars to meet." Ethan smirked weakly. "You came. That's something." "I came," she said coldly, "because Barton's men broke into my apartment, left my wedding dress hanging like a warning, and nearly scared my neighbor half to death. You work for him. You tell me, should I be scared?" Ethan's voice was low, heavy. "Not of me. Not anymore." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Then why am I here?" He gestured to the old table in the middle of the warehouse. On it lay a folder, thick, filled with printed documents and photographs. "Because you're not just fighting Barton," he said. "You're fighting a system that protects him." Imani's gaze flicked toward the folder. "What is this?" "Everything," Ethan said. "Every dirty deal, every bribe, every fake grant. Barton's been laundering government money for decades through development projects that don't exist. But here's the twist, and the politicians funding those projects, they're the ones keeping him untouchable." Imani's heart pounded as she flipped through the pages. There were photos of Barton shaking hands with city officials, senators, even a federal housing director. Documents detailing campaign donations, offshore accounts, shell companies. This is massive," she whispered. "If this goes public—" "It won't," Ethan interrupted. "Not yet. Barton's got people everywhere. He'll shut it down before it breathes. That's why you need me." Imani froze, looking up sharply. "You?" Ethan nodded. "I know how he operates. I know where he hides the real files, the hard evidence, the ledgers, the encrypted data, the offshore links. But I can't get to them alone." She crossed her arms. "And you expect me to trust you after everything you did?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice rough with guilt. "I didn't come here for forgiveness, Imani. I came here because Barton used both of us. I was stupid, blind, and greedy, but now I see what he really is. He's not just protecting his empire. He's protecting murder. Your father's death wasn't the first, and it won't be the last if we don't stop him." Imani's chest tightened. "You knew about my father?" Ethan hesitated. "Not the truth. Not until I started digging after you exposed me. Barton always said your father was a liability, someone who got too curious. I thought it was business talk. Until I found his name in Barton's old insurance settlements." She stared at him, fury burning behind her calm. "You built your empire with the man who killed my father." He didn't deny it. "And that's why I'm going to help you destroy him." Silence filled the space again. The rain outside softened into a steady drizzle, like the city was listening. Finally, Imani took a deep breath. "All right," she said. "We do this my way. No lawyers, no press, no sudden hero moves. We build a case so solid not even Barton's money can bury it. Ethan nodded. Deal. She gave him a long, searching look. But understand something, Ethan. If you lie to me again, I won't call the cops. I'll handle it myself. He swallowed hard, nodding again. Fair enough. Hours passed as they worked side by side under the dim warehouse lights. Imani mapped Barton's financial trail on her laptop while Ethan filled in details. Hidden accounts, shell companies, code names for projects that never existed. Together, they began to piece together a digital skeleton of corruption that reached higher than either of them expected. At one point, Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. You know, I used to think Barton was unstoppable. He made everyone believe he was building the future, new homes, new communities. But all he built was debt and death. Imani didn't look up. Men like Barton always build their success on someone else's pain. He looked at her, her focus, her quiet power, the way her hands moved with purpose. He'd once tried to break her, and instead, she'd become stronger than anyone he'd ever met. Imani, he said softly, you don't need me to tell you this, but you're the only one who can end him. She finally met his gaze. No, Ethan, we end him together. That's your redemption. By dawn, the rain had stopped. A pale light crept through the warehouse windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The files were organized, the evidence clear, but there was still one missing piece. The original hard drives, Ethan said. Barton keeps them in a secure vault beneath his private office. It's not digital. Old school. He's paranoid about hacking. Imani closed her laptop. Then that's where we go next. Ethan frowned. You mean break in? She gave him a look that was half a smirk, half a dare. You think we've come this far to stop now? He chuckled softly, almost forgetting the fear that had been strangling him. You really haven't changed. Imani turned toward the door, the first light of morning glinting off her determined face. Oh, I've changed, she said. I just stopped playing by other people's rules. Outside, as they walked toward their cars, a figure watched from the shadows. The same man from the black sedan, phone pressed to his ear. They're working together now, he said. Barton's cold voice crackled on the other end. Good, let them get close. The closer they get, the easier it'll be to bury them both. The man nodded, lowering the phone as the morning sun rose over Atlanta, warm, bright, and utterly deceiving. Because beneath that light, darkness was waiting. They called it Barton Tower for a reason. The building rose like a glass monolith from Midtown, its mirrored surface swallowing the sky, its name glowing in polished letters that promised safety and success. For most Atlantans, it was a sign of prosperity. For Imani, it had become a tomb she planned to open. The plan was simple on paper and complicated in every other way. They needed the drives, physical encrypted hard drives that Barton insisted on keeping offline. Ethan knew the layout, the security routines, the guard rotations. Vanessa had given them a window, a single, narrow margin between the late-night maintenance shift and the morning security sweep. Jordan had arranged a decoy, an anonymous tip that would draw attention to a bogus leak in a suburban property. Thinning Barton's guard focused the night they would strike. Imani stood in the back of Ethan's battered truck, hood up, rain from the late afternoon still wet on her shoulders. Her eyes were cold and bright, the kind of look that used to scare him into flattery. He saw it now and felt the old shame. How many times had he let that look soften him, make him careless? Tonight he was only useful for what he knew. Tonight he was only a map. They arrived near Barton Tower just past midnight. The city breathed softly around them, neon and street lamp halos pooling on wet pavement. Ethan parked 2 blocks away. From there they would walk and blend with late shift workers, 2 ordinary people moving through the night. Imani checked the flash drive in her pocket and breathed in slowly. Remember, she said, voice flat, no surprises. We get the drives, we get out. Fast and clean. Ethan nodded. Vanessa has a key card for a contractor's elevator. It'll take us to level B maintenance access. From there, a service corridor leads under the vault. It's heavily timed, but there's a blind spot during the shift change. He hesitated, looking at her. If anything goes wrong, we run. Don't stop. They moved like ghosts. The contractor's elevator smelled faintly of oil and disinfectant. Vanessa met them there, her face pale but steady. She pressed the key card, the doors closed, and the lift hummed down into the building's underbelly. The service corridor was a world apart from the tower's glittering lobby. Low ceilings, exposed piping, fluorescent lights that buzzed like distant bees. Cameras tracked their movement, but Vanessa's access looped them around the feeds for a narrow slice of time. Heartbeats measured in seconds. At the vault door, Ethan took a breath and spoke the passcode he'd memorized months ago while pretending to be Barton's favored broker at fundraisers. The lock clicked. For a second, triumph flared in his chest. Then the door opened and reality rushed in. The vault was clinical and cold, rows of metal cabinets and a bank of older servers humming like sleeping machines. At the back, behind a reinforced cage, sat a massive safe. Barton's old habits, his distrust of cloud storage. The very thing Imani had promised to take. Ethan keyed the override code he'd pressured a junior IT guy to give him months earlier, the one he'd been saving for this moment. The safe door opened with a whine. Inside were boxes, labeled, sealed, precise. They found the drives heavy, labeled with cryptic project names that now read like indictments. Imani's hands didn't shake as she slipped them into a padded bag. Then the twist, a sound like a footstep where there shouldn't be. Metal on concrete, deliberate, too calm for a guard who expected nothing more than a routine check. Ethan turned, and in the dim blue light a figure stepped from the shadows. Barton's security chief, the man from the black sedan. He was not alone. Behind him moved two more men, slow and professional. "Thought you'd be smarter," the chief said. His voice was low, amused. "Vanessa really thought she could sell you a lie." Imani's mouth went dry. She scanned for exits, for anything that would make this end clean. Vanessa's face paled. She'd been the mole as well as the informant, brave, foolish, compromised. Ethan swallowed. "We can walk out of here," he said, voice trying to sound reasonable. "No need for trouble." The chief smiled like someone enjoying a private joke. "You should have stayed quiet, Ethan. You should have kept your mouth shut. Barton's not a man who tolerates loose ends." For a heartbeat, Imani considered running. Throw the bag, sprint through the corridor, and risk bullets, risk capture, risk everything. Then she looked at the drives in her hand, at the evidence she had come to reclaim, at the faces she wanted to make answer for her father's death. Running would mean losing the truth. Staying meant facing whatever came. She stepped forward slowly. "You can take me," she said. Her voice was steady enough to frighten the chief. "You can take us both. But these drives, if you destroy them, the money trail still exists. Jordan has copies circulating. The journalist network won't let a story die because a few men in suits expect fear to silence it." The chief's smile flickered. He gestured to his earpiece. "Barton thinks he has friends all over. He does. But he also pays us to ensure trouble doesn't spread. Take them quietly." The two men moved in. Hands on their jackets, the situation about to close like a trap. But then something unexpected. A staccato of footsteps from the far end of the corridor. Faster. Urgent. Barton's day security drawn by Jordan's decoy. Running the fake leak he'd set in motion. The balance shifted for a breath. The chief cursed, calculating. He had to choose between an arrestable skirmish that would bring scrutiny or a clean extraction. In that sliver of indecision, Ethan did what he'd always been capable of when cornered. He lied convincingly. "We're leaving. We have Barton's authorization," he barked, voice confident. He stepped forward, putting himself between the chief and Imani, forcing the chief to doubt. The chief hesitated. Vanessa seized the moment. She lunged toward a nearby control panel and slammed her palm down on a red switch. The lights cut, plunging the corridor into darkness. Alarms began to wail, purposely set, chaotic, the kind of noise that invited more attention than secrecy ever wanted. In the chaos, Ethan pushed. Imani ran. The security men cursed, fumbling toward flashlights. For a breathless few seconds, they were simply people in motion. Grimy elevator, running feet, the banging of a heavy door as they forced it open and spilled out into the night air. They didn't stop until they reached the truck, rain stinging their faces, lungs burning. Vanessa was already there, looking shaken but alive. Ethan handed the bag to Imani without looking at her, as if the act could transfer guilt. They drove away as sirens began to sing somewhere behind them, the tower's lights receding like an accusing eye. In the rear view, Barton Tower stood unbowed, its windows glittering, its name arrogant against the sky. For a moment, Imani felt like she'd stolen something from a sleeping giant and woken it in anger. Back in the truck, Imani opened the bag just enough to see the drives inside. She ran a trembling hand over one label, Brookview Files. Her heart hammered with the knowledge that she now held proof of her father's death. of Barton's laundering, of the mechanism that had devoured so many honest people. She passed the bag to Vanessa. "You did right," she said quietly. Vanessa's eyes searched Imani's face. "You sure this is safe?" "Barton will come harder." Imani looked at the drives as if they were living things, truths that could not be unmade. "No," she said. "But now the world can see. Now it can be made to remember." They drove into the night, sirens growing faint, rain turning to a steady wash. The vault beneath Barton Tower had not swallowed them. It had given them what they needed, and somewhere inside that fortress, men in suits were waking up to the fact that a storm had come, and that storm wore Imani Brooks's face. The next morning, Atlanta woke to headlines it couldn't ignore. Local stations buzzed with whispers of a possible security breach at Barton Development Group. Anonymous leaks hinted at stolen data and missing files. Nothing was confirmed yet, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more dangerous. Imani watched from Jordan's small newsroom office, the drives lined up on his desk like loaded weapons. Each one represented years of silence, of lives bought and buried. Jordan typed furiously, cross-referencing data while Vanessa decrypted files. Ethan paced the room, restless, his nerves stretched thin. "This is everything," Jordan murmured, eyes fixed on the monitor. "Not just property fraud. This is government embezzlement, false housing contracts, bribery." Barton wasn't building homes. He was building lies. Imani leaned closer. "Can we prove it?" Jordan nodded slowly. "We can, but we have to move fast. If Barton realizes what we took, he'll unleash everything he has to erase it." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "He already knows, trust me. The second we left that tower, his people started tracking us. We're ghosts right now, but that won't last long." Vanessa glanced up, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. "Then we leak it anonymously, all of it. To every journalist, every platform." Imani shook her head. "Not yet. If we dump it now, Barton will spin it. Say it's fake, say I'm bitter, say Ethan's covering his crimes." "We need irrefutable proof before we go public," Jordan sighed. "And where do you plan to find that?" "You already broke into his vault." Imani's eyes hardened. "Then we go higher. There's someone funding him, right? Someone bigger." "Barton answers to someone." Ethan froze. His gaze flickered toward her. "You think he's just a middleman?" Imani nodded. "No one that arrogant stays clean this long without a leash around his neck." Jordan's phone buzzed. He frowned, picking it up, then his face drained of color. "It's my editor. She just called to say Barton filed a lawsuit against you, Imani. He's claiming defamation, hacking, and corporate theft, and he's naming me as your co-conspirator." Ethan cursed under his breath. "He's flipping the narrative." Imani crossed her arms, her voice low but steady. "Then we flip it back." Across town, Barton sat in his penthouse, a glass of bourbon untouched beside him. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the cold perfection of his world. The security chief stood nearby, grim-faced. "They got the drives, sir. But the backups are secure." Barton didn't look up. "And the people?" "Still in Atlanta. The journalist, the woman, the broker. We can have them disappear quietly." Barton's gaze lifted slowly, his pale eyes narrowing. "No, not yet. Killing them makes me a criminal. Discrediting them makes me untouchable." He stood, straightening his tie, his tone smooth and cold. "We'll turn the city against her. The headlines will say she's unstable. A bitter woman seeking revenge for a failed relationship. Ethan will take the fall. The journalist will lose his credibility, and by the time anyone checks the data, it'll be useless." He took a sip of bourbon. "And if that doesn't work," his lips curved faintly, "then we'll finish it the old-fashioned way." By afternoon, social media exploded with stories twisting the truth. Fake accounts spread rumors. Imani Brooks hacked her ex-fiancé's company out of jealousy. Others shared edited clips from old interviews, claiming she'd been obsessed with Ethan. Jordan slammed his laptop shut in frustration. "He's faster than we are." Imani's phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Miss Brooks." Barton's voice came through calm and condescending. "You're becoming quite the celebrity. You should be proud." Her grip tightened on the phone. "You killed my father." A pause. Then a soft chuckle. "Your father was a good man, honest, idealistic. But idealism doesn't mix well with business. You're learning that now, aren't you?" Her voice dropped, trembling with controlled rage. "You can threaten me all you want, but I've got your secrets." "Oh, I don't need to threaten you." Barton replied smoothly. I just need to remind you that the truth is useless when no one believes it. The line went dead. Imani stared at the phone for a long moment, her pulse pounding in her ears. Then she turned to Jordan. We hit him where he can't lie, the federal side. The housing grant records. If he's been funneling money from the government, there has to be proof in D.C. Jordan frowned. You're talking about federal investigation. That's another level. Ethan nodded slowly. But it's the only thing that scares him. Federal oversight. If we take the evidence to them directly, they'll bury it, Vanessa interrupted softly. Unless you have someone inside. Imani looked at her, realization dawning. You do, don't you? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. My sister works for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. She handles financial audits for federal grants. If she sees this data, she'll know what's real and what's forged. Jordan leaned forward. Can she be trusted? Vanessa's expression hardened. She's the one who told me to run when Barton started cleaning house 2 years ago. Yes, she can be trusted. That night, Imani drove alone to Vanessa's sister's home just outside Washington, D.C. The drive's locked in a hidden compartment under her seat. The highway stretched out endlessly before her, headlights slicing through fog. She kept checking her mirrors, half expecting the black sedan to reappear. Every time she saw headlights behind her, her chest tightened. Somewhere around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed with a message from Jordan. Barton's people raided my office. I'm fine, but they're looking for you. Be careful, she typed back quickly. I've got the drives. Keep Ethan and Vanessa safe. If I don't make it, you leak everything. Jordan's reply came seconds later. You'll make it. But deep down, Imani knew Barton wasn't done playing. As dawn broke over the outskirts of D.C., Imani finally pulled into a quiet suburban neighborhood. The air was still, her headlights catching the edges of a small house surrounded by oak trees. She parked, checked the street, and stepped out, clutching the bag of drives close to her chest. The door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, sharp eyes, dark curls, the same cautious intelligence as Vanessa. You must be Imani, she said softly. Come inside. We don't have much time. Imani stepped into the house. The woman locked the door, then led her to a small dining table where a laptop was already open. I'm Rachel, she said, plugging in one of the drives. Show me what you've got. As the data loaded, Rachel's expression shifted from curiosity to horror. Oh my God, she whispered. This isn't just fraud. These are government contracts. Barton's been forging housing records for years and using state funds to buy property under fake community projects. If this gets out, it'll blow up half the department. Imani's voice was quiet but firm. Then let's make sure it does, Rachel nodded. I can get this to an internal investigator. But once I do, Barton will know where it came from. Imani smiled faintly. Good. Then he'll know I'm coming. Outside, a black sedan idled at the end of the street. Inside, Barton's security chief spoke into his phone. She's here, he said. Barton's calm voice replied. Then don't stop her. Not yet, let her deliver it. I want to know who catches the bait. The file Rachel had copied into a secure flash was not small. It was a map of theft, invoices, memos, redlined approvals, and a ledger that named projects that never existed. She ran verification scripts, cross-checked grant numbers with federal databases, and flagged inconsistencies that could not be explained away. The evidence was clinical. It read like a confession carved into spreadsheets. Imani watched from the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, as Rachel worked. There was no triumph in her face yet, only a cold, steady hunger for truth. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, old systems were waking up, and with them old danger. By mid-morning, Rachel whispered, I can get this to an internal investigator. He has the clearance, and he's clean. He'll open a formal inquiry. She looked at Imani with careful warmth. If he calls it right, Barton's funding will be frozen overnight. Imani let out a breath she didn't know she'd held. Do it. Rachel moved with the silent urgency of someone who had done hard things before. She encrypted the files, created a secure channel, and sent the packet to an internal investigator whose name had been whispered in Rachel's office for years. David Holloway, a man who had built a reputation for refusing bribes and exposing corruption. 2 hours later, David called. His voice was low, formal, almost stunned. Ms. Brooks, this is David Holloway. The data is clean. I'm initiating a preliminary audit. This may move faster than you expect. If this is what it appears to be, Barton will be in serious trouble. Imani felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you, she said simply. David's next words were cautious. You should not come to DC right now. This is a high-risk operation. If Barton learns the source, if anyone inside my office leaks, it could jeopardize everything. He paused. We have to move quietly, she told Jordan and Vanessa the news. Within hours, the tone of their little war changed, from street-level strategy to federal protocol. Jordan worked his angles, preparing a careful release strategy should the department confirm the findings. Vanessa and Ethan tightened their security routines. Imani slept little, but she slept with a new kind of hope. Then the first betrayal cracked the surface. A week into the audit, an internal email chain leaked. It was small at first. A short memo with a redacted name that suggested the file came from within HUD. But whoever read it let rumor take shape. Barton's lawyers were quick. Within 24 hours, he had planted a whisper campaign. The federal audit was a reaction to a malicious hack, possibly by a disgruntled former employee or a bitter ex. The story ate its way into local outlets, and opinion pieces began to question the motives of the person who'd first handed the data to the agency. David Holloway called in a cold fury. Someone in the department has a mole, he told Rachel. They're trying to muddy the water before the audit finishes. We're narrowing it down, but it's a complicated beast. Barton runs deep. Imani's stomach dropped. A mole meant Barton had friends in the very place they'd hoped would be their salvation. How long? She asked. Not long, David said. But this mole may be trying to save themselves, or they may already have a plan to take out anyone who threatens the flow. That night, Imani returned to her apartment to find her mailbox filled with glossy flyers, attacks on her credibility, carefully crafted rumors that mixed truth and fiction to make her look like the angry woman trying to destroy a philanthropist. A single envelope lay on top, no return address. Inside, a photograph of her mother at a small funeral years ago when Samuel Brooks had been buried. Someone had been watching, she called Vanessa. They found something personal, she said quietly. Vanessa's voice trembled. They're trying to scare you. They want you to run. Imani thought of her father and of the list of men whose comfortable lives were built on stolen money. She thought of Rachel in a safe house, of Jordan with a laptop full of drafts that could not yet see daylight. She thought of David, who risked his career by touching Barton's ledger. Fear spoke loudly in the city then, but so did resolve. We don't run, she said. We move forward. Then the real counterattack began. Late that evening, Ethan's phone vibrated with frantic texts. His office had been raided, not by federal agents, but by men in black suits carrying court orders and heavy faces. They went through everything, taking boxes and locking files behind metal doors. He called Imani with a shaky voice. They took my hard drives, he said. They said it was part of a fraud probe, but they were careful. Too careful. Imani hung up and stared at the ceiling. Barton's people were learning to mimic authority. They were using the system to hide their tracks. The thing about power, she thought, is that it knows how to wear a badge. 2 nights later, Rachel's sister, the HUD auditor who first agreed to pull the files, disappeared from work. She left her lunch on the desk and didn't come home. Her text messages stopped. Rachel's calls went unanswered. The agency reported a medical leave, but sources in the office whispered something different. She'd been reassigned to a field audit in another state. A careful relocation disguised as policy. David's voice over the secure line was flat when he told Imani, "We're seeing pressure from above. There's an effort to reassign anyone who touches this case. Barton's not just business, and he's influence and muscle. We have to be smarter." Imani felt cold anger bloom. Barton was not only trying to destroy her and her allies, he was moving to suffocate the audit itself. Then we make it public, she said. If they silence the department, we'll use every outlet we can. Jordan will run the story with the evidence we have. If Barton wants to make moves, let them be seen. Jordan was careful, surgical. He contacted trusted national outlets, fed them redacted, verified excerpts of the files, and made clear the source was under federal review. The narrative shifted slowly back toward truth. People began to ask questions that could not be answered by smear pieces. Barton's board members started to distance themselves. Investors called for audits of their own, but the cost was rising. On a rainy Thursday, a car hit Imani's mother outside a grocery store. It was marked as an accident. Witnesses called it careless driving. The police filed the report as such. Imani hurried to the hospital with Vanessa and Jordan, hands numb, breath shallow. Her mother's injuries were severe: broken ribs, a concussion, a long recovery ahead. The message had been sent, clear and cold. Stop. Imani held her mother's hand in the sterile hospital room and felt all the old fear and new fury twisting together. Her mother's eyes fluttered open and in a weak voice whispered, "Finish it for him." Tears blurred Imani's face, but they tasted of iron and determination. She left the hospital that night and called David Holloway. "We go live," she said. "We expose Barton now with everything we have. Let him try to quiet it." David hesitated, then answered with a worn, brave tone. "If we do this, we do it right. We coordinate. We protect your mother. We give the country a chance to see the ledger without those who would bury it." Imani stood outside the hospital, rain soaking her coat, and felt the city press close around her like an audience. She had wanted justice for years, but justice had a price she hadn't expected to pay. People she loved were hurt. Allies were at risk. The corridors of power echoed with footsteps that wanted her to stop. She breathed in deep, tasting rain and iron and grief, then whispered into the night, "Then we pay that price. Because if we don't, nothing changes. Not for my father, not for all the others." Somewhere far above, Barton watched the city lights from his penthouse and smiled, confident the tide could still be turned. Below, in the loud, hungry streets, Imani Brooks prepared for the fight that would either free the truth or bury them all. Rain always had a way of returning to Atlanta when something big was about to happen. That morning, the sky hung low, heavy and gray, the kind of sky that pressed down on you, that made the air feel charged. Imani stood at the window of her apartment, watching the drops slide down the glass like seconds running out. On the kitchen table behind her, Jordan's laptop played the countdown. Breaking news: federal inquiry into Barton Development Group and alleged fraudulent housing schemes. The anchor's voices filled the room, measured, cautious but trembling with the kind of energy that only came when power was being challenged. It was happening. The story had broken. The world was finally listening, but at what cost? Hours earlier, the decision had not been easy. David Holloway had called from D.C. His voice was tired, strained, and scared in a way she'd never heard before. "They've started deleting files. Imani, Barton's people have corrupted the audit servers. If we don't act now, there'll be nothing left." Imani didn't hesitate. "Then we act now." She, Jordan, Vanessa, and Ethan had gathered at Jordan's newsroom. Every drive, every memo, every encrypted copy was prepared for simultaneous release. One to national news outlets, one to HUD investigators, one to a private whistleblower network. Jordan's fingers trembled as he hovered over the send key. This is the point of no return," he said. Imani met his eyes steady. "There's no return worth going back to." He hit the key, and like that, Barton's empire began to crumble. The reaction was instant. News stations erupted with coverage. Documents flooded social media, files with Barton's signature. Evidence of money moved from government housing grants into offshore accounts. Lists of politicians and developers whose names were now tied to Project Brookview. It was everywhere. Trending, reposted, dissected. People were angry. Neighborhood groups realized their communities had been promised homes that were never built. Contractors realized they'd been cheated out of wages. Families realized their taxes had funded Barton's lies. By noon, Atlanta's streets were alive with protest. Crowds gathered outside Barton Tower. Reporters, workers, activists. Signs read, "Justice for Brookview. Our homes, your greed." Truth doesn't die in silence. Imani watched it unfold from the crowd, hood up, invisible among them. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about every person Barton had fooled. But she didn't smile. Not yet. Because she knew Barton wasn't the kind of man who lost quietly. Inside the tower, chaos reigned. Executives shouted into phones. Shredders ran nonstop. Lawyers filled conference rooms. Barton sat alone in his office, the view of the protests stretching out below him like a slow-moving storm. He'd seen this before. Scandals, accusations, public outrage. It always burned bright, then faded. People forgot. Money fixed things, but this felt different. This was personal. He turned on the TV just in time to see Imani's face, an old photograph from a business event, now plastered across every channel. The anchor's voice was sharp. Sources say whistleblower Imani Brooks, daughter of the late contractor Samuel Brooks, is believed to have provided evidence linking Barton Development Group to widespread federal fraud. Barton's hand tightened around his glass until it shattered. Blood dripped onto his cufflink, dark and slow. He didn't even flinch. "She's made herself a hero," he muttered. "Heroes die young." Across town, Ethan and Vanessa were helping Jordan coordinate interviews and press briefings. The newsroom buzzed with adrenaline and fear. Jordan's phone rang nonstop. Politicians, federal agents, rival journalists all wanting the same thing: confirmation. Vanessa turned to Imani. "They're saying Barton's gone underground. His security team's been pulled. No one's seen him since this morning." Imani didn't answer. Her mind was racing. Barton was a man who lived for control. If he'd vanished, it meant he was planning something. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced down and his face went pale. Imani grabbed it. A message flashed on the screen, no number, no name. Just words, "Meet me at Brookview alone." Her stomach dropped. "Brookview?" Ethan nodded slowly. "That's the original site. The one your father worked on." Vanessa's voice trembled. "It's a trap." Imani's eyes hardened. "Maybe. But if Barton's going to end this, he's going to do it where it started." By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and gleaming. Brookview Estates, or what was supposed to be, sat on the edge of Atlanta, a half-developed wasteland of weeds and concrete foundations. The wind whistled through unfinished walls. Imani parked and stepped out, the mud sucking at her boots. She followed the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, until she saw him. Thomas Barton stood near a rusted bulldozer, dressed in his tailored gray suit, as if he'd just come from a board meeting instead of a war. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You look just like your father," he said. Imani kept her distance. "You remember him?" "How could I forget?" Barton said calmly. "He believed in truth. I believed in profit. Only one of us survived." Her jaw tightened. "You killed him." "I corrected him," Barton said. "He was going to ruin everything. He didn't understand how the world works." She stepped closer, voice trembling with fury. "And you think I don't?" Barton tilted his head. "You're smarter than he was. But you made the same mistake. You believed people care about the truth. They don't. They care about power, and I still have plenty." Imani's hand brushed the small recorder in her pocket. "Then tell me, Barton, what does power sound like when it's over?" He smiled, sensing her defiance. "It doesn't sound like anything. It just changes hands." Then he reached into his jacket, slow, casual, and pulled out a gun. Imani froze. The metallic click echoed across the construction site. "You should have stayed in your lane," Barton said quietly. "I buried your father's body under his own work. Maybe I'll do the same for you." Imani's pulse thundered in her ears. She kept her voice steady. "Go ahead. But this time the whole world's watching." She glanced toward the horizon, a row of vehicles pulling in, headlights cutting through the dusk. News vans, federal agents, cameras. Barton's face changed just slightly. Confusion, then realization. The recorder in Imani's pocket had been live for 15 minutes, broadcasting his confession through a secure feed to Jordan's newsroom. Ethan had stayed behind, sending the link to the press. Jordan had gone live minutes ago. Every word Barton had just said was already public. Barton's hand trembled. Imani stepped forward. "You built your kingdom on lies, Barton. And now the people you stole from are tearing it down." The sirens wailed closer. Barton looked around, eyes darting between the approaching agents and the gun in his hand. For a moment, his arrogance faltered. Then he turned the gun, not at Imani, but on himself. "No one takes me down," he said softly. The shot echoed through the empty estate. Birds scattered into the evening sky. And just like that, the man who had ruled Atlanta's skyline fell into the dirt that had once buried his crimes. Hours later, Imani stood by the edge of Brookview, watching the flashing lights fade. Ethan walked up quietly beside her, his face pale, shaken. "It's over," he said. She shook her head. "No, it's just beginning," he frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned toward the horizon. the city glowing under the night sky. The money Barton stole can rebuild what he destroyed. My father's name is clean again, but there are more like him out there. Men who think truth can't fight power. I'm going to prove them wrong. Ethan nodded slowly. And me? Imani looked at him, the man who'd once betrayed her, who'd helped her take back everything. You find your own redemption, she said softly. We've both got ghosts to bury. She walked away, her reflection fading against the wet asphalt, her father's memory burning brighter than ever. 1 week later, national news declared Barton's empire dismantled. Federal investigations expanded across multiple states. His assets were seized, and Brookview was announced as a memorial housing project in Samuel Brooks's name. Imani stood at the site's entrance, where fresh concrete now held her father's initials. The wind moved through the new walls, quiet, steady, like a promise. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. Rest now, Daddy. We finally made them see. And as she walked away, the city began to heal. Not because power had fallen, but because one woman had refused to stay silent. Spring came early that year in Atlanta. The air carried the sweet smell of magnolia and rain-soaked clay, the kind of scent that made the city feel new again. Downtown buzzed with the sound of construction, hammers, cranes, the rhythmic clang of a city healing itself. And at the center of it all stood a new sign, freshly mounted against a gleaming foundation of brick and glass, the Samuel Brooks Housing Center, built for the people who believed in better. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds. Families, contractors, reporters, city officials. A quiet hum of hope threaded through the crowd. On the small outdoor stage, Imani adjusted the microphone. Her black blazer caught the morning light, her curls framing a face that was no longer defined by pain but by purpose. The applause dimmed as she began to speak, her voice steady, warm, and alive with memory. This land was once supposed to be Brookview Estates, a project that promised homes and delivered nothing but empty ground. My father believed in this site. He believed that it could change lives. He gave everything he had to make it real. And when greed tried to bury him, we built something he'd be proud of on top of those lies. The crowd fell silent. Cameras clicked softly. A tear rolled down Vanessa's cheek as she stood near the front, clutching a small bouquet of flowers. We didn't just rebuild a place, Imani continued. We rebuilt trust. We rebuilt truth. And we proved that when the powerful fall, the people can rise. She smiled faintly, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. Construction workers, single mothers, small business owners, the same kind of people her father had built for. This isn't the end of my story, or his. It's a reminder that no lie lasts forever, not when good people refuse to be quiet. When the speech ended, the applause was thunderous. Children from the new community center released white balloons that rose into the bright blue sky, their strings twisting together as they climbed higher, a tribute to those who had fought and those who had been lost. After the ceremony, Imani walked to the edge of the property where the old Brookview sign still stood, rusted but untouched. Ethan was waiting there. He looked different, quieter, older, humbled. His suit was simple, no designer logos, no arrogance left to wear. Looks like you did it, he said softly. Imani smiled. We did it, he chuckled lightly. You did the heavy lifting. I'm just glad I got to be part of fixing what I helped break. For a moment, the two stood in silence, the wind whispering between them. There was no romance left, only a strange kind of peace that comes from shared scars. Ethan looked toward the skyline. You ever think about what's next? Imani followed his gaze. Every day, Jordan and I are starting a foundation, one that protects whistleblowers, especially women. No one should have to risk their life just to tell the truth. Ethan nodded. That sounds like something your father would have built. She smiled. It is. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a check, his entire remaining savings. For the center, he said quietly. I don't need it, but the city does. Imani looked up at him, surprised. Ethan, you don't have to. He cut her off gently. Yeah, I do. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away, not as the man who betrayed her, but as the man who finally learned how to let go. Weeks later, the housing center opened its doors. Children laughed in the playground where unfinished concrete once stood. Families moved into new apartments named after the victims of Barton's fraud. A mural stretched across the side of the community hall. A vibrant portrait of Samuel Brooks wearing his old construction helmet, smiling toward the horizon. At its base, in bold letters, the artist had written, "The truth builds what lies destroy." Every time Imani passed that mural, she touched the painted outline of her father's hand and whispered, "Still building, Daddy." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, she sat on a bench overlooking the site. The same bench her father once dreamed of putting here for workers to rest. Jordan joined her, carrying 2 coffees. "They're calling it the Miracle on Peachtree now," he said with a grin. "You're trending again," she laughed softly. "Let them trend the story, not me. I've had enough spotlight to last a lifetime." He nodded. "You sure you're done fighting?" She glanced at him, eyes thoughtful. "Truth doesn't need a fighter, Jordan. It just needs someone willing to carry it until it stands on its own." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a construction crane moved. Slow and steady, another project starting. Another chance for something honest. Imani leaned back, closing her eyes, letting the sound of the city wash over her. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like home. A bronze plaque was unveiled on the steps of Atlanta City Hall. It read, "In honor of Samuel Brooks and his daughter Imani Brooks, for proving that courage and truth can rebuild a city." The camera shutters clicked, reporters scribbled notes. And in that moment, in the heart of a city that had once been stained by corruption, the truth had finally found a place to live. Imani stepped back from the plaque, her reflection caught in the bronze. Her father's name gleamed beside hers. She smiled softly. And as the crowd applauded, the wind carried her whisper into the air, a promise, a prayer, a vow. No more silence. And Atlanta, for the first time in a long time, seemed to listen.